Absolutely.
There's a reason why the founding fathers set this republic up in a way that said that we shall not mix state and church, shall not establish a religion.
Separation of church and state.
Now, I have a very straightforward question.
Good.
Carl, because I'm curious about your choice for vice president. Do you believe in the separation of church and state?
Sure.
Now, listening to a modern liberal argue for a separation of church and state can leave anyone familiar with the actual history of this doctrine completely dumbfounded. It's like trying to make sense of this kid.
Have you ever had a dream that you want him to do you so much you could do anything?
Now, first of all, Christians do believe in a separation of church and state. As a matter of fact, we invented it. Now, that's right. If we were a teen soap, we broke up with the state first. Then the state started spreading rumors like, the church broke up with me, so why does she have to talk about me all the time? The reality is, the separation of church and state means something way different than what anarchists would have you believe today. The Bible always taught, always, as a part of God's law, that there is to be a distinction between the realm of the civil magistrate and the realm of the church. In history, particularly during the time of the Reformation, Christians fought for the biblical idea of a free church and a free state. Now, our founding fathers were the beneficiaries of these Christian ideas, only when they employed them, they never, ever meant the perverse thing that these leftists and cultural anarchists mean today, which is separation of God and state. Now, they meant what the Bible meant. These are two distinct realms with differing functions. The state is to execute justice, punish evil, and protect and reward the righteous, while the church functions as the realm of worship, evangelism, proclamation of God's truth and justice, and to care for the broken. Both institutions were distinct, but both were to be ruled, here it is, by God's law. So Christians created the distinction in our culture, but those who want to see the world burn redefined it. So A, you're welcome, leftists, and B, how dare you? How dare you? Next, from the standpoint of the United States, the phrase, the separation of church and state, doesn't even appear in our Constitution. Here's what it does say. It says, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, which, in its historical context, meant what the Christians who influenced it said it meant. There are two distinct realms. They didn't want a situation that they had in England, wherein the state had blended with the church, thus destroying the distinction in those realms and creating a church ran by the state. That is against God's law, my friend. And as a matter of historical fact, the popular and mangled phrase, the separation of church and state, actually appeared in a letter from Thomas Jefferson on January 1st, 1802. He wrote this letter to the Baptists in Danbury, Connecticut. These Baptists were concerned about the danger of a state-run denomination or church, and they were also concerned about not being able to influence the government properly as the Baptists. So Jefferson wrote back to them encouraging them not to worry about an official state-operated church because, here it is, there is a separation of church and state. Jefferson wasn't undoing the biblical and historic model. He was actually upholding it. He didn't mean that there's to be a separation of God and state or of morality and state like the leftists and other moral anarchists want today. I mean, just think about this, guys. Think about how far we've actually gone. We live in a time where Christians have bought into the fiction that the church has no responsibility to be a prophetic voice to the state, and that magistrates in the civil realm are under no real obligation to obey God. Having consistent Christians in the civil realm is about as foreign and out of place as Hillary Clinton on this interview with the Breakfast Club.
What's something that you always carry with you?
Hot sauce.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you getting information right now?
Hot sauce. Hot sauce in my bag, Swag?
Hot sauce.
Really?
Yes.
Now listen, I
yes.
just want you to know, people are going to see this and say, okay, she's pandering to black people again.
Okay. Is it working?
Wow, first of all. Now, who told her that it was okay to say hot sauce? Listen, Hillary, if at any time you can put it in there, mention a stereotypical food item, they'll love it. Now, let's face it, America, we're a far cry from the first Supreme Court Justice, John Jay. John Jay was not only involved in the founding of our nation and part of the first SCOTUS, but he was vice president and then president of the American Bible Society.
Founding Father John Jay was appointed by George Washington as the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, a co-author of the Federalist Papers with Alexander Hamilton and James Madison, Governor of New York, President of the Continental Congress. John Jay's contributions to the founding of the United States is significant.
But did you know, under his leadership as president of the American Bible Society, he extended the influence of the Bible into Latin American and guided the organization as they increased their capability to produce more than 600,000 Bibles per year.
In a letter to his eldest son, John Jay wrote, "The Bible is the best of all books. Continue therefore to read it and to regulate your life by its precepts. Engage with the Bible in its influence over the centuries."
Brought to you by Museum of the Bible.
John Jay was a consistent Christian involved in civil government. America's case law system was ordered directly after the law of God given by Moses. So, another point for Christianity and government, and a big fat secularist can't even create a culture because their worldview can't make sense of anything award for the secularists. Now, we would give you a trophy for your participation, secularists, but we're not you. Now, John Jay was so committed to God's law as a magistrate that he enacted laws that were consistent with God's law in the Bible. Here's what he actually said about God's law, quote, "It appears to me that the gospel not only recognizes the whole moral law and extends and perfects our knowledge of it, but also enjoins on all mankind the observance of it, being ordained by a legislator of infinite wisdom and rectitude, and in whom there is no variableness. It must be free from imperfection, and therefore never has nor ever will require amendment or alteration." Close quote. Now, as Christianity moved throughout history, we've established culture. We've beautified the world, preached the gospel, and established justice. Everywhere we went, we proclaimed the good news of the Lordship of Christ, and we called people in every realm to obedience to Christ. Everyone, everywhere, is called to come under the Lordship of Jesus. Now, over the last generation, we've stepped away from being bold, consistent, and mighty, and the resultant fruit of this little evangelical experiment has brought us to a nation with total confusion. I mean, you know there's a problem when Taylor Swift has more Twitter followers than Jesus. This is, by the way, what you ought to expect. It's another one of those important distinctions that are true, whether you like it or not, Mr. Destroyer of all things good. We either have a choice between a universe of total meaning with Christ or a universe of total meaninglessness without Him. Your move, Christian. We'll be right back, guys, right here on Next Week with Jeff Durbin. Thank you for staying with us, guys. Share the episode. We'll see